Hi, everybody. We hope you're doing well. We want to continue to pray for you and see what God has for us during this time. But we do want to let you know this Sunday, we will be meeting for the first time face to face in our courtyard for our outdoor service at 5 o'clock. So if you're able to make it, if you're local and you feel comfortable joining us, please come at 5 o'clock for our outdoor service at the church. If you are not local or you don't feel comfortable gathering, we will still be on Zoom. And next week, we'll be on Zoom collectively all again. We will have the same information for the Zoom meeting and the password. So please join us one way or another, in person or on Zoom. We're going to keep looking at the names of God and the names of Jesus. Now remember, Jesus used the name I am and identified him as deity or God or the Messiah and gave a lot of illustrations to go along with that. So whenever he said I am, it was just like in the Old Testament of hearing the name Yahweh, this unique name for God of the Bible. That other names mean God, but they could be used in other forums and other capacities as well to talk about gods. But Yahweh was the special name of God where he said, I am who I am. He's God. So Jesus uses that same concept of saying I am and then adds on some images along with the name. Last week we looked at Jesus saying, I am the bread of life. Today we'll look at Jesus saying, I am the good shepherd. Now when people would hear this name, they wouldn't just think of Yahweh, the I am of messianic prophecy or godliness or being linked to God of the Bible, but they would also hear this idea of the shepherd in divine form or related to God and think back to Psalm 23. If you know Psalm 23, it's often called the shepherd psalm or something like that. And it's when David is talking about God as a shepherd. And he says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That's the first verse and how it opens up, that God is a shepherd. And because he is the good shepherd, or he is a godly shepherd, he takes care of his flock or his children. So now Jesus takes that image or that idea and he links it to himself saying, I am the good shepherd. So I'm going to read out of John chapter 10. This is verse 11 through 14. It says this, Jesus speaking, and he says, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and he runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep. But I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me. But there's things to notice about this that we miss culturally sometimes too. But Jesus said he's the shepherd and he is the good shepherd. He's not a shepherd. He's not a typical shepherd, but he's a good shepherd. And this addition onto the definition of a shepherd, of being a good shepherd, is something Jesus wanted to emphasize. As the word for good in the Greek is kalos. And so this word kalos is an interesting name because it doesn't just mean good in general. It means inwardly good qualities like good character, but also means outwardly good as well. So if a person was kalos, it would basically mean that their character was really quality, was solid, was superb. And so if you look inside their life, you would just have to say, this is an amazing person. There's nothing you could really say against them or against their character. But also outwardly, the way it would reflect outwardly is that when you would see that person or the reputation of that person, people would know this is a good person. This is a quality person. This is attractive, not in terms of being beautiful or handsome, but in terms of being appealing and people wanting to be around that person because of how inherently good they are. So what's on the inside truly comes out on the outside. And he uses this illustration of his goodness in the context of sheep and a shepherd because people would understand better. As if you think about it, shepherds have many functions, but their key functions are to protect, are to guide, are to nurture, and make sure that the sheep not just survive, but thrive and to do well in their lives. And that's one thing that Jesus does, but he doesn't just show his divinity, he also compares himself to the religious leaders of the time. So as we looked in that verse, there are some things that we might not understand as much culturally because of not being in a culture where there's sheep and shepherd. and not being alive back then, and how shepherds often worked. Because back then, a lot of times the owners of the sheep weren't the shepherds. They would often hire somebody to be a shepherd and to go take care of their flock. It was hard work. It was dirty work. It wasn't really fun. You're out there in the fields alone, just walking with sheep. You sleep outside at night, guarding the sheep. You might have to put your life on the line to protect them from wolves or other dangers or weather. And so they would often hire somebody to do this job. But Jesus picks up on this. That's why in verse 12 and 13 he says this: "The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when they see the wolf coming, they abandon the sheep and they run away. Then the wolf will attack the flock and scatter it. The man," meaning the shepherd, "runs away because he's a hired hand and he cares nothing for the sheep." You see, sheep are defenseless. Sheep are not that smart. They can't come up with a plan or strategy when they're being attacked to try to survive. They're basically dead. That's why they need a shepherd to take care of them. But a shepherd who's going to run away when there's an attack is not really a very good shepherd. But it also makes sense because they're hired. It's not their sheep. So if the sheep are lost, they might lose their job, but they don't really lose anything else. But if it's an owner, it is their investment. It belongs to them. It's their possession. And so they treat the sheep very differently than a hired hand would. And so what Jesus is basically saying is, sheep are defenseless. And oftentimes, when a wolf attacks, the shepherds just run away. But I'm not like that. I'm the good shepherd, is what Jesus is saying. Peter writes this in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 25. He says, "You were like sheep going astray, but now you have returned to the shepherd and overseer of your souls." See, Peter understood that sheep often go astray and sheep need a lot of help. And in so many ways, us as people, we are like that as well. But because of that, we need somebody who is good watching over us. We don't just need a shepherd, we need a good shepherd. And Jesus makes this differentiation between himself and the religious leaders. The religious leaders are like the hired hands. They don't truly care about the sheep because they are not theirs. But Jesus says, "You're my creation, you're my children. I care about all people, and I am a good shepherd. I'm ready to lay down my life for you." And, as a dad, I always thought, the people who will take the best care of my kids is me. And maybe that's a little presumptuous, but the reason that I thought this was because they're my kids, right? They're if somebody else is watching them, I'm sure they'll do a good job, but it's different because they're not their children. That when it becomes my children, is going to be different. That I should treat them the best out of anybody. I have the greatest and highest responsibility out of everybody to take care of them. But that's why it's always sad whenever you hear about children suffering because of the way their parents treat them. That other people treat them better than their own parents. Other people love them more than their own parents. Other people talk more respectfully to them than their own parents. And that is so sad because deep in our hearts, in our souls, we say that that's not right. Right? Like the person who should be your biggest fan, who should lift you up the most, who should encourage you the most, is your mom and dad or your grandma and grandpa, right? Or your aunt and uncle, people who are your family. And Patty, my wife, she teaches kindergarten, so she has incredible stories of kids coming into class and different things that they'll do and different things that they'll say. And I'll never forget one time a girl came in and she was just really down and really discouraged. And as Patty started talking to her to find out what was going on, she talked about how her mom had been treating her and how her mom hates her and doesn't love her. And Patty tried to comfort her, says, "Of course your mom loves you. She doesn't hate you." And she says, "No, she does. To her, I'm trash. She called me trash. That's all I am to her." And Patty's heart broke because there's this little girl whose mom has been treating her in such a way that she not only verbally hears, but also understands through actions that she's a piece of trash. And that just breaks our hearts. And so what Jesus is saying is, you have to remember that I am the good shepherd. I'm the best shepherd. I will protect, I will guide, I will nurture you if you'll come to me and let me lead you as a shepherd leads their sheep. As Patty began to talk to her, she said, you're not a piece of trash. And the girl said, yes, I am. My mom told me that I am. And she said, no, you're not. She said, how do you know I'm not a piece of trash? She said, because I know God. And she said, what does that mean? She said, because God has said that you are a treasure. And she said, really? Yes, God looks down at you. He helped create you. And to God, you are his treasure. And when she heard that, her eyes lit up and her smile returned and her tears stopped. And she said, I am his treasure? And that whole day, Patty would just call her, okay, God's treasure, it's time for you to eat, right? Okay, God's treasure, it's time for you to pack up. And just throughout that whole day, Patty just called her treasure to remind her of what a great treasure she was to God. And so we have to remember that Jesus laid down his life for us, that he's the good shepherd. He is Yahweh, not just I am, but I am who is the good shepherd who lays down his life for his sheep. Let me close reading out of the rest of the passage in John chapter 10, verse 15 through 18, which says this, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of the sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice. And there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down out of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. So Jesus shows us that really what he does, what he decides to do, is to lay down his life and lay down his life for all people. In every way, he is God. And in every way, he is a shepherd who guides and protects and nurtures. But he is a good shepherd who does everything like a shepherd should. He lays down his life for all people. And it's up to us to choose to follow him. God bless.